Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Well, welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, broadcasting live, this time from Seattle, Washington. This is the 26th episode. This is where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber, and I'm here today with Vida Oliphant Sneed, who is also the first family member I have on this podcast. So I'll be calling her in this podcast, but I say to her always when I see her, Auntie Vida. So Auntie Vida, how are you today?
I am wonderful and grateful to be here with you this morning, Hylke.
Well, me too. It's I feel perked up in my seat, which is always the response I have when I see you, which was one of the reasons that I wanted you to be on this podcast. I'm going to say much more about you in a moment. And before I do this, I always like to remind us of the intention of this podcast. So I'll talk about that for a second, and then I'll introduce more of you, and we'll dive into the conversation. And if you're listening today, welcome to Being Rooted and Unwavering. Rooted and Unwavering is a podcast, is all geared towards helping us to get grounded into what's true, what's best, our highest self, also when we're challenged, especially when we're challenged. And when we are challenged, my experience has been that there's multiple forces pulling us in different directions. And not all of these directions are equally wise, compassionate, caring, or things we might be proud of later if we pursue them. And so the question that I often ask myself is, what is true now? And what does it mean to be truly coming from a place of alignment, from a place that's truthful, loving, and of service? And that's what these podcasts are about, to listen to leaders from literally all walks of life and be inspired by their stories. So I invite you, if you're listening, as you're listening to Vida Oliphant Sneed, my Auntie Vida today, listen to her and say, what can I learn from her about walking through my life in a way that's in alignment with me? Her story will be undoubtedly different from yours if you're listening. And it's not about taking her truth. It's an inspiration for each of us to listen and say, what is my truth? What is my truth? So with that, I'm going to say a little bit about Auntie Vida, Vida Oliphant Sneed. Vida Oliphant Sneed is a woman of many, many colors. She is a resident of Seattle, Washington for most of her life, and she got her degree in arts, the Bachelor of Arts in English from the University of Southern California in 1979. She also holds a K-8 elementary teaching certificate and currently serves as the teaching leader of the Seattle Central Evening Women's Class for Bible Study Fellowship and International Bible Study. Now, there's something else which is important about her, which is 1981, another important date in Vida's life. She married her sweetheart, Steve Sneed. For 42 years, their love has been growing and is still going strong. And Vida told me that her greatest degree is the MOM degree. She is blessed to call 6 wonderful people her children, 3 girls and 3 boys. And the icing on the cake of her life are her 6 grandchildren, which bring her immeasurable joy. Now, after the birth of her first son, Vida left the workforce for a while to become a full-time mom. She shares that knowledge of what can happen with Black boys in the school system and the desire to give their children a God-anchored worldview moved her and Steve, her husband, to homeschool their children. And she's been doing that for 19 years. And family and faith are the underpinnings of Vida's life. And then Vida reconnects in some deeper other way with her love for language, the spoken word. And she becomes a playwright with a play that will find its debut in a Seattle theater. We'll hear about that today as well. The play is called The Lion Tells His Tale, which tells a story to break down barriers and target the heart. What she writes is what we often fail to do through political debates, roundtable discussions, even taking up of arms, often can be done through the power of the arts, the power of the story, the power of seeing life through another lens. And my favorite sentence of what she wrote was, I desire to be a part of that process with this work. That's one of the things I love about Auntie Vida. She has a sense of humility, not like I'm leading this process, I am the only person in this process, but during the stream of life, being of service. When I think of Auntie Vida, I think of somebody who moves me to tears often. I often think of you when I'm going through a difficult moment. I think of you sitting upright, sometimes at our dining table or other places where I see you. And there's also always a sizzle of energy and of commitment and of light and care and deep, deep acceptance, which I have come to call unconditional love. Welcome, Vida. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. So we are going to talk about what it means to be connected. What it means to be connected. So, Auntie Vida, can you tell us a little bit about your journey with connectedness in your life? Because as we just heard, you've been through so many stages already. Can you tell us about this?
I love that term, connectedness. It's not one that we think of often when we start looking at our lives through that particular lens. And so as I do that, as I think about connectedness, I have to also think about grounding. What are the things that make me grounded in life so that my foundation is stable and I'm then positioned to connect both with myself and with others in an authentic way, right? And so I think if I were to look back at this point in my life in terms of this journey toward discovering what it is that grounds me, what it is that provides me the kind of roots, the name of your show, Rooted and Unwavering. What are the things that root me so that I can be unwaveringly me as I interface with others and go about the business that I've been granted to do? So for me, those things that keep me connected and grounded to my true self, I think, are some of the things you already alluded to. It has to be my family, and it has to be my relationship with God. Those are the two things that keep me feeling centered and whole and purposeful, um, in the daily experience of my life. So that's what comes to mind initially is those two things are the things that keep me grounded, keep me connected to my inner self, and then allows me, excuse me, to be positioned to show up. Just show up and enjoy the moment of living and being connected with other people. That is something that I truly, truly treasure is
Uh-huh.
sharing moments with other people. I do. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes, I can see that. The fruition is the joy. The fruition is the joy. And the root is in the family and in your relationship with God.
Yes.
Now, tell me about what that's like within Vida Oliphant Sneed. Like
Mhm.
when you sense that sense of connectedness, or when you practice that, or when you put attention on it, what happens within you? How do you know that it's quote unquote on, or if
Right.
is it ever off? I don't know.
I think, yes, sometimes it probably is off. And that's those moments where you have to withdraw and regroup and refuel, um, reflect, and be still. I think that there's a value in that as well. So that's kind of what I would categorize as the off times. That's that centering time, right? Whatever that looks like. Um, so for me, the on this, you said something earlier that really triggered um, about unconditional love, right?
Mm.
I really embrace the concept of unconditional love because I have lived and experienced unconditional love, first and foremost through my parents. There was never a moment that I questioned whether I was loved by my parents. And when I think about that now as an adult woman and as a mother, and the number of times that I know that I have not risen to my highest self in my in the earning of my mom degree, right? I reflect back on how knowing there were moments that I probably was not lovable. The choices that I was making were things that were not um, what they would have desired for me to make. And I might have even caused them disappointment.
Mm.
But I never felt like I was a disappointment. That was never something that was um, communicated to me verbally or non-verbally, right? So that aspect of being of unconditional love, first and foremost, like I said, by having experienced that in my growing up, um, and then secondly, having experienced the unconditional love of God and really trying to learn what that means in its fullness, because in many ways that is incomprehensible to me at points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know me. I
Yeah.
know me inside out, and I don't love myself. No, I just playing. but anyway, so the on part of that for me becomes this opportunity to be in someone else's life an instrument or a presence of unconditional love.
Mm.
Um, and unconditional love really is, in many respects, I'd say as humans, is probably not our first choice, because there's so many barriers and filters to that, judgment and criticism, and I wouldn't do it that way. Well, why are they doing it? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, what are all the kind of ways that we could look upon someone else with
Mm.
an eye that reduces or minimizes or
Mm.
dismisses them, right? So
Yeah.
this practice of unconditional love has to be intentional for me. And it is at the same time a privilege to learn how to do that and be
Mm.
intentional about learning how to do that, particularly like, when people show up and they're not really looking lovable in the moment.
Right, right. When the filters of judgment, criticism are right on within us. And
They're
so
there.
I want to stay with the beginning
Mm-hmm,
of Vida for a moment, at
mm-hmm,
least as far as I understood it. So your relationship with your parents. And so you said something about they showed me unconditional love, and I never felt that I was a disappointment, right? Can you share a little bit about what that's like? Because I think for many people, that's an unusual experience. I know that's one of the things that I noticed becoming part of your family, marrying to Jahan. Your I always get this confused. Is it your nephew, right? That's how it works in English. In
yeah,
Dutch, it's another thing. I always get this cousins, nephews. I still don't get this. Anyway,
yeah,
your nephew.
my
Like
nephew.
I was very struck by that being like the atmosphere in the family. So can you say a little bit more about how that manifested? Maybe you can give an example. How did it manifest?
So that's a good question. How did it manifest? Because it's just this growing thing, that you realize that I've realized as I've gotten older, right? And looking back on my experience, particularly once you get out of the house, I got out of the house and saw the varying ways that people were parented. Um, I would say it would look something like this. Let's say I chose to do something that was not in agreement with how I was being reared. Poor
Mm-hmm.
choice. Poor choice. Rather than my mom saying, well, this was a really poor choice. I'm really disappointed in you. I'm disappointed at how you weren't raised like this type of thing. She would do something like this, which in many ways, like, I don't want to answer these questions. She would say, is this a reflection of who you are? Is this a reflection of who you want to be? how might you think about a situation like this the next time you encounter it? So it was this process of self-examination that we could not escape. Because sometimes you don't want to just punish me and be done with it.
Yes, 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 yes.
Not escape this process of self-examination. And that has been such a critical tool for me in my life. I am so grateful that I was taught how to self-examine, to be courageous in that, not be comfortable with lying to myself or excusing myself or blaming others for how I have chosen to behave. That has been such a tool. My father might say something like this: V, he called me V. V, you got to know how to do your own thinking or someone else will do it for you. So it was those kinds of things that caused me to put the act, whatever it was, in proper perspective, right?
Yes.
This separated from me and my sense of being, separate that and be able to just look at the choice. And so that's what I mean by just being able, that was my experience of an example of experience of what unconditional love, how it was fostered and demonstrated.
So it wasn't like oh la di da kid gloves love. It was also fierce love, it sounds to me like, with your mom asking, I think her name Laverna, being Laverna, right? Laverna asking you, is this how is this a reflection of you?
Right.
Who do you aspire to become?
Right.
Putting it right back in you, this sense of self accountability.
Yes.
And also your dad, Clarence, I believe, to say, are you going to do your own thinking? Otherwise, somebody else is going to do your thinking for you. The sense of helping to instill a deep sense of standing in your own two shoes, but not making you wrong for how you stand in them. And that is, to me, such a beautiful gift and radiates also from how you are today, is what I can tell and what I can see. So say a bit more, Auntie Vida, about how that light of awareness that was lit so early on then guided you in your later years, where you became a mom, not of one, not of two, but of 6 children. Like, how did you learn through that time, and how did that light inform you?
Right. I think that that became such a part of my process of thinking that I think that it allowed me in many ways to approach the privilege of motherhood with a sense of intentionality. It became my highest calling. It was the fullness. I brought the fullness of who I am to mother. In many regards, I put many of the things that I thought life was going to be for me, I put them on hold. They became secondary, and the rearing of my children became my primary goal. Okay, so when you set a primary goal, right, there has to be this constant process of evaluation along that path. Am I reaching the goal? How am I reaching the goal? Is there another way to go about reaching the goal? Hey, you didn't do that very well right there, right? How are you going to handle that when you're not showing up your best self because you're tired and irritable and you're whatever. The day has just been too much and you want to go to bed and you still got 5 hours left to go, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think in some regards, I was unflinchingly honest with myself around what I saw at the time to be the places that I stumbled in my motherhood. words, careless words that may have been said, expectations that were my expectations that I was visiting upon my child without taking into consideration how they were uniquely and wonderfully made. I was unflinching in a lot of regards about those aspects of my parenting. And in some sense, I think that served me because it caused me to be accountable to me, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
so if this is not the way you want to show up, how are you going to do better? Well, that's the same kind of process that my mother taught me in
mhm,
my formative years as well. So, I mean, I think that it has served me in everything that I have done in a lot of respect. Now, sometimes I'm just saying what I'm saying here. Sometimes I didn't want to live at that level of accountability.
uh-huh,
Sometimes that tremendous sense of responsibility that I continue to hold to this day, right?
mm,
Sometimes that thing may not always serve me because
mm,
it may not have allowed me at points to do the kind of uh, being still, being reflective, carving out space for for myself. Because if
mm,
someone else shows up with a need, I'm gonna rise up to that need, right? Feel
mm.
like I have to be responsible for it because I can do it. So if it's before me, I might as well do it. So that I say that to say it hasn't always.
Mm.
I've had to wrestle with that at points when competing
Uh-huh.
values maybe are coming into play. So I hope that answered your question.
Beautifully said. Yes, yes. Well, I was listening to you, and I'm thinking, you know, you've had a few decades of experience of life, right? And you've raised 6 children who are all adult, and so that's part is now that chapter is done in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way I heard it was that there was so much strength in the self accountability, and also sometimes like any tool overused becomes a weakness. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like running into the weaknesses of that. Can you say a little bit about sometime, maybe a time in your life where you felt less connected, where you felt maybe going through some kind of struggle? And I'm asking you that because my experience of humanity is that many people, if not all of us, go through these times, and it's not whether we go through them, it's
Yes,
how we go through them.
absolutely.
So, can you say a bit more about your experience with challenge and maybe
Yeah.
feeling disconnected and how you work through that?
Yes. Yes. I'm glad you talk about challenges because challenges are just absolutely a part of life. Um, the very inception of this play that I ended up writing, The Lion Tells His Tale, comes out of a period of intense challenge. And so I'll talk about that a little bit and then go backwards in that. What? So how did this come about? Well, we were slotted, packed, and ready to go for my first trip ever to Africa. We were going with a collection of people, one of whom is Delbert Richardson, the person who I ended up writing this play, collaborating on this play with. And pandemic, days before we were to go, after a year of planning and meeting and uh, preparing, the pandemic happened and shut it down. And I was swirling in disappointment. I was swirling in grief. I cried like a newborn almost anytime I got the opportunity. I was so crushed to kind of have this life, you know, dream just unexpectedly snatched from me. And it was a challenge. It was an internal challenge. In some regards, as I said, God is the anchor and the the all in all in my life. There was a challenge in that, in yielding to his no
Mm,
or wait, right?
mm,
In this scenario. Um, And it took me a while to be able to embrace the grief and the disappointment and see it as an opportunity for growth, right? So when I say that in terms of looking back at other places in my life that have been critically challenging like that, it wasn't a new thing in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
The way I have come to measure my growth in challenge is in my recovery time.
Mm.
How much time does it take me to recover? And recovering meaning regaining a sense of balance internally, regaining a centeredness,
Mm.
um, regaining a peace, even if the circumstances haven't changed,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And so for that's kind of how I have grown. Previous challenges coming forward to this more recent challenges have prepared me in the face of challenge to be okay with being in challenge, to
Yes.
acknowledge the feelings that are part of the challenge, the grief, the disappointment, the anger, the why me pity party,
Yes.
they're there. And they're real. Um, and that's okay to give myself
Mm.
permission to do that, but to recognize I'm not going to stay here. This is
Mm.
a part of the journey. I'm not going to stay here. I am confident of two things: that God is God all day long and that I am His. And because He is a God of growth and development and deepening of faith, He's not going to leave me here. This becomes purposeful in His
Mm.
hand. And the purposefulness of it, in terms of the canceled trip to Africa, became made known in the creation of this play. From those ashes, the joy of this experience of now having written this play and this play being able to have a life of its own, uh, totally outside of whatever I ever anticipated for my life,
Mm.
is a part of the challenge. And
Mm.
so it's that beautiful challenge. It's
Mm.
that beautiful challenge. It's that beautiful challenge. It's finding the beauty in the challenge and anticipating the deepening of self, the deepening of faith for me, the growth opportunity, and the joy,
Mm.
the resulting joy.
There's so much in what you're saying. God is God. I am His. God is a God of growth. There is a sense of purposefulness. I'm not going to stay in the ashes. It's going to rise from it. Now, can you tell a little bit about the precursor to the grief? Because you say, oh, well, people might say, I'm just going to Africa. I know there was much more than, oh, I'm going to, wherever I'm going. There was something much deeper to that. So can you speak to that? And also how this grief turned into a play. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey before we
So
take a break.
let me make sure I understand what you're asking me in terms of the precursor to the grief.
So people might say like, oh, I'm going to France. Oh, the trip is canceled. Well, we'll find another trip. My sense is this trip was much bigger than going on a trip.
Yes.
What
Yes.
does this trip signify to you? And then how did the grief turn into a play?
Yes. Okay. What did the trip mean? The trip meant for me going home to a place, allowing my feet to touch the soil of my ancestors. The trip meant for me that I was being granted the opportunity to do something my parents had not been able to do and maybe wanted to. The trip was, oh my goodness, it meant so much to me in terms of my sense of self, a sense of return and completion. I wanted to put my feet on the soil in Africa and say to whomever was my ancestor many, many, many years ago who was taken from that soil, I wanted to put my feet on that soil and say, I am here. I returned and I am whole. my husband and I wanted to have a little renewal of our vows on the shores where our ancestors were taken. And we wanted to just affirm that your pain was not in vain. And I am here as a witness that your resistance and your resilience and bore a fruit that you may not have been able to see. So that was kind of the precursor, all the internal emotional part that was going into this journey for me. And then it was snatched. And I'm gonna tell you one of my life kind of, beliefs, if you will, or guides, things. When I don't handle disappointment well, so I have kind of structured my life in such a way to minimize disappointment. I hold material things loosely. If I have them, that's great. If I don't, that's great too. I value my relationships, but I realize that there will be points in my relationship where there will enter periods of disappointment. I don't handle disappointment well. And I don't, in some ways, I would have said of myself, so that means I don't hope for things big either. Because if they don't materialize, then I got to deal with intense disappointment, right? God called me to deal with my relationship with disappointment in this situation. That's one of the things I realized. He caused me to deal with my relationship with disappointment. And to give me a perspective of it that is perhaps a little bit more healthy.
Let's explore this more after we take a short break. We've been in a conversation with Vida Oliphant Sneed about what it means to live a life of deep accountability, self-accountability and inquiry. Who do I wish to become? Who am I? Is this who I am? And then all the things we learn when we stand in that question. And we develop, therefore, different relationships with, for example, disappointment, which we'll hear more about after the break. And after the break, we're also going to hear more about how that sadness and disappointment of not standing on the shores of her ancestors turned into a play. We'll see you back after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
So welcome back to this conversation on Rooted and Unwavering with Vida Oliphant Sneed. We're going to be talking about what it means to be truly authentic, connected to God, to family, and being in deep self-accountability. So, Auntie Vida, say a bit more about your learning from God, with God, about learning to work with disappointment and how that turned into The Lion Tells Its Tale.
Yes. Disappointment. Disappointment. When I say God called me to confront my relationship with disappointment, I think I mean that in the sense that if I believe that God is God, if I believe that God unconditionally loves me, if I believe that all things he brings into my life are purposeful and for my good, whether they feel like that or not, right? Then I have to recognize that those situations in my life that might produce disappointment in me are also a gift from his hand. Those are the places of discomfort that he's going to reveal more to me about who he is and who I am. And so embracing those places that cause these feelings that I really don't like to have. I really like it when it's roses and sunshine and beachside sips of something good and whatever. We like that, right? We don't run toward those situations that are going to bring us discomfort,
Yeah.
right? But I think when I say confront my relationship with disappointment, it's coming to understand that those places of discomfort, whether it be grief, whether it be disappointment, whether it be fear, whatever sense of dis-ease that I'm experiencing, can produce and will produce something deeper in my life. Do I like it? No. Am I learning to be grateful for it? Yes. Does it give me a deeper understanding of who God is, who I am, and how I'm aligning with His purposes in my life? Yes. So there is inherent fruit even in the situations that produce disappointment. So God showed me, I've got some inherent fruit for you, Vida, in this great grief that you're feeling right now, right? Through this no or wait response that I'm giving you to this particular trip from Africa. So how did this play come about? Well, my husband and I, my husband has been in the arts all of his life. That's where his career has been. And our friend, Delbert Richardson, who is the owner and curator of the National Award-winning museum, the American History Traveling Museum, The Unspoken Truths. We were going together to Africa. And one of the things we were going to do while we were there is having this cultural exchange on both sides of the ocean, talking about enslavement, talking about it from the African perspective, talking about it from the African American or Black perspective, right? That was part of what we were going to do. And so we were out walking one day, Steve and I, and Steve had previously, his boss that he used to work with had talked about, wow, what would it look like if the museum were to be a play, right? And so that has always kind of percolated in the back of his mind. That was way back in 2014. So we're walking one day, and we're saying, yeah, man, this play thing. And I said, Steve, I see it. I see the opening scene. And I tell him the opening scene, and he's like, wow, V. And so then we talked with Delbert. Hey, what would you think about if we tried to formulate a play around the museum? And so we just started in this pandemic conversations, right? About what would this look like. We talked and we met for a couple of years. I mean, all through the pandemic. And that's kind of how the concept of the play and then the actuality of the play was birthed. The thing was, because we kind of was shut down, I had the opportunity to have the time to just write, right? That would not have normally been the case. And so all things kind of worked together for the good. All things worked together for the good. And the play was born from that. And it's gone through several iterations. I just finished a rewrite just this past week, and we anticipate it debuting in May of 2024 with the Intimon Theater, which is one of the professional theaters here in Seattle, Washington. Yes. So there's the joy.
I love that story. I can imagine you and Uncle Steve walking and you saying, or you talking to each other, what would it be like if this museum became a play? And then you sitting with that and letting it do its thing on you and letting the creative spirit take you there and do that and do that work. And you mentioned earlier that disappointment often leads to revelation about who God is and who you are. So in the writing of this play and this process of this play, which you also said is turning into its own life.
Yes.
What has been revealed to you about who Vida is? What's true about Vida?
That is such a wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. I have always said out loud to my children, this is kind of funny to me, you know, you can do anything you set your mind to. You can do anything you set your mind to. It's all about growth. It's all about your perpetually putting yourself in places where you can continue to grow. And now, you remember I mentioned earlier, you know, so many of the things that I wanted in life, I kind of set aside when I was rearing my children, and that my words have come back to bite me because this is what God has given me. Okay, Vida, let's see you walk this out. Let's see you do that. Put yourself in places of growth where you don't know what you're doing. I have never written a play outside of like a little church play, right? In my life, right? Complete dependence upon God to do this. Complete dependence. And to the point where, Hylke, before I sit down and write, I pray and I worship. That's what has been the process for me of tapping into, you said it earlier, the creative spirit, tapping into the creative spirit of the great creator from whom creativity flows. Just take a look outside, right? And so how do I align? We talked about how do I align myself under God's creative spirit and his divine purpose for this work? I don't know what it is. I'm just along for the ride, really. But how do I align myself with that as it unfolds, as he reveals what Lord, what do you want me to do with this? I'm asking that all along the way. I'm sitting in the room with people who this is their profession. And then there's me, and I'm battling this sense of inadequacy, right? I don't know what I'm battling that and learning to stand firm in my creative process.
So how do you stand firm in your creative process? And I'm imagining this, right, Vida? So you're there surrounded by the professionals.
Yes.
And there you do your worship and your prayer. And I'm just trivializing a little bit for effect, right? So you're there, you do your thing, and you write, and then you're in this room with the professionals. So what's happening within Vida when somebody says, well, I don't know about that, or we're going to do this differently? Because I imagine that would happen in a situation like that.
Oh, yes. or, I mean, definitely. And because it has happened, not with, you know, I'm not naming any names or anything, but it has happened often, maybe not intentionally, right? But it registered on me like that. And what happens? Oop, I'm off center. Right? I'm off center, right? Because I'm allowing that to strike me in a certain kind of way, right? So this inner talk becomes like, actually, no, that's not what you want. Actually, that doesn't represent what you were trying to do. So you have an opportunity to clarify, right? And become centered again in what you have been given. And, you know, being empowered, self-empowerment, if you will, to speak and make it known. And to stand in that. So it might look like, actually, what I wanted here was, and being able to just say it. Now, even in that, being open, you know, because I don't know what I'm doing, being open to take in, wrestle with, how does this mesh or meld with what I was doing? Is this information going to help me improve what I'm trying to do? Then take it. Set whatever aside, pride, ego, whatever you want to call it, take it. Is this thing going to help me do what I want to do? No, it's causing me to drift from what my intentions were. Receive it, discard it, and move on.
I'm sensing that your father is speaking again in some way.
V, you better do your own thinking or someone else will do it for you. Right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. And then your mom saying, "Who do you want to become? Is this you?"
Is this
It's amazing how powerful those two instructions are. It's amazing. Who do you want to become, and do you want to let somebody else do the thinking for you? And you need that, and it's coming to fruition now in another way as you are letting this play out into the world. It's amazing to me. So for our listeners and also for me, because we get to those, I love the head movement going to the side, like being basically banged like in a boxing match,
right?
almost towards
Right.
knockout. Right? Life does that. And people and there's always a person that somehow pushes the button, like that one thing that you do not want the person to say and they say it. Right? It happens. So tell us about your recovery. Like, what does Vida do for her recovery?
Yes.
What do you do?
Again, Hylke, the very first thing I do is pray. I often say to myself, and will say out loud as well, my wisdom is faulty. My sense of direction is faulty. Don't follow me to Safeway. You might end up at QFC, right? And so when I recognize that I've been off-centered, I got to examine that. And the first thing I do is pray. I pray confession. Lord, this is what I'm feeling. Is it legitimate? Am I tripping? Meaning, am I just walking by my own wisdom and my own perspective here? What do you have for me in this? Now, that's when I have an opportunity to get away from the thing and be able to have that time of reflection and prayer and so on and so on. Sometimes you're right in the moment and something has knocked you off and you feel, I can always feel this rising, you feel this, you feel it isn't, it's a physical experience of the rising and your defenses are ready to get up and your da-da-da is ready to get up, and you may or may not handle the situation well. You may not have the wherewithal I may not have the wherewithal to exercise the self-control that's necessary to restrain my tongue from saying what my mind just conceived, right? And I mean, and so those are the places, even when I do not behave well, I still, when I get away from the situation, have to take it to prayer and take it to confession. That, when I say God is my anchor, God is my anchor. God is my anchor, period. I know that I know that I know that I cannot live without him. And so if I'm going to live well, I have to be aligned with him and I have to allow him access to the parts of my life that he's working on. And when I say allow access, that means I have to recognize and open, be willing for him to make me uncomfortable in those areas so that I can grow.
Allow myself to be uncomfortable. Open myself, let me grow. You mentioned prayer a few times, and I'd love for you to say a little bit more of what is your experience of prayer and how do you sense that connection with God? How do you know you're out of that mental mind gobbledygook and you get to a, well, my word, more connected place?
Yes. I thank you for that question. I love that question. Prayer for me is conversation with God, period. It doesn't mean that I'm on my knees, that yes, sometimes, but not always. When I was younger, there's a scripture that says to pray without ceasing. I didn't understand that. How do you pray without ceasing? Well, if you have some more birthdays and you learn how to pray without ceasing, you have some life situations and you learn how to pray without ceasing, right? I'll be 65 in a couple of weeks, right? I understand very well about praying without ceasing because I understand that prayer is this ongoing conversation with God. And through this ongoing conversation with God, it helps me to move my eyes from me and my circumstances and move my eyes to God and his will and his plan and his purpose for me, for my life, right? So prayer, I pray all the time. I am constantly in conversation with God. Short little arrow prayers. Okay, Lord, it could be just that. Okay, Lord, help me. You got to help your girl. It could be something like that. It could be the deep recognition at the moment that my pride has flared up or my default of fear has flared up. Is that immediate recognition that, Lord, I need you. I need you. Or, Lord, forgive me of my pride that is attempting to steal your glory. You're the one who has done X, Y, Z. It may have come through me, but you're the one who's done X, Y, and Z. Don't allow me, forgive me for attempting to, in my pridefulness, for stealing your glory, right? So it's all manner of prayer because there's all types of things that I need to take to God in prayer, in this continual conversation. So how do I know, that I'm in conversation with him? Because my spirit confirms it. My inner spirit confirms that I am in conversation with the Most High God. That I just know. And going back to how do you measure, when you've been realigned, right? And how much time does it take you to realign? One of those measuring sticks for me is the nature of my prayer, right? What is the content of my prayer? When I'm still off center, I'm praying a certain kind of thing. Lord, help me to understand. Lord, I'm feeling angry. I want to lash out. Lord, so that the content of my prayer also is an indicator for when I have regained my sense of balance, right? Because then my prayer becomes more like, Lord, thank you that you didn't leave me there. Thank you, Lord God, for the insight and the perspective that you've given me when I see things through a different lens. Thank you for giving me the ability to forgive myself and to forgive others, right? So the content of my prayer changes. That's one of the ways that I know.
I'm so struck by what your prayer seems not to be about, which seems not to be about, give me this, like Father Christmas, or Mother Christmas. None of that. It's what I hear much more from you is, teach me my place, teach me my service, show me what is true. And whether we have a relationship with God or other higher power or something deeper in us, I think that's something all of us can relate to. In this moment, there's this sense of opening to putting ourselves on the edge of discovery of the unknown and saying, I don't know how to do this in my head. Please show me. Higher powers, please show me what is true here. What is true here, and not go on the autopilot. That's what I'm hearing in what you're saying.
I think if there's anything that I ask for continually from the Lord is wisdom. That is a thing that I am. Lord, give me your wisdom. Show me, give me wisdom. That is a continual part of my prayer life.
Yes. Wisdom, not widgets.
Right. Those widgets, they come and go, I tell you.
Oh, so seductive. on TV. We're getting towards, miraculously, the end of our conversation.
Yes.
I want listeners to know about your play.
Yeah.
So what is your intention for the play? Say about what you want to say about it.
My intention, as I said, is for the play to have the life it was intended to have, to hit the people that it was intended to hit, and to tell the story of my good friend Delbert Richardson. It's the story around how he, as a Black man in America, discovers his identity, stands in his identity, and how his life work flows out of that in terms of the museum as he has gathered and researched and gathered artifacts and is displaying, for those who may not know, some of the truths that are part of the African American story, and the story from the Africa to America kind of thing. So education, awareness, understanding the resilience and the resistance and the love of my people, and putting it out there as an offering. Hey, would you like something sweet to partake of? Here it is. Here it is. Partake of it. So it's a gift. It's a gift.
It's almost like you're making accessible the life and intentionality of the creator of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm hearing you is you are telling the story so that the story can be all of our story.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Yes.
and that it can affirm our common identity.
It is. And our collective history, right? When the full story, historical story is told, then everyone should see themselves in the story. And the story should enhance the lives of all of us collectively who get to share this space. And so that's the offering that myself, Steve will be directing, my husband will be directing the play, and Delbert Richardson, Mr. Delbert Richardson, he will be also participating as the focal point of the play. That he and his wife also, Kimberly, the four of us have kind of just given this thing shape and are presented it as such. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, of course, anybody who wants to see the play, it's going to be in the Intiman Theater in Seattle in
Correct.
May.
May 1st will be opening night. It'll just have six shows, so 6 performances. So I believe pre-sale tickets are even available now, but certainly mark it on your calendar and tell somebody.
Tell somebody, and go see this play and let it help you to integrate more of your own story. The lion tells his tale. The lion tells his tale, and what I'm hearing from this conversation is so that you can own your own story. That you can own your own story. It's beautiful.
I'm going to tell you real quickly, there's an African proverb that this is based upon that says, until the lion tells his tale, the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And so that's the underpinning of this piece.
Wow, it's beautiful. Final question. What would you like to say to somebody who's listening as something that you would like to say to them, especially if they happen to be in an hour of need or challenge? What would you like to say to them?
Yes. I think I'd like to say this. Life is a beautiful struggle. Embrace the beauty in the struggle. The struggle is real, and the struggle is ever present, and the struggle may be episodic. It's this, but it's a beautiful struggle because it's a shaping struggle, and there's purpose in the struggle. So that would be my parting gift to myself and to others. Embrace the beautiful struggle because that is life. That's life.
Thank you so much. That's I'll echo that, the embracing of the beautiful struggle and let life help you reveal more about you.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing. And I'm hearing such humility. Auntie Vida, it's been, I don't really have the words for it. It's been something very beautiful for me to sit with you today. You shared with us so much wisdom at so many levels. The African story, the story of your relationship with God, family, the authenticity that you share today about what it's like to go from being in struggle to going to making the struggle beautiful and finding out about ourselves. So thank you so much for being with us. If you've been listening, hopefully you learned something that you find helpful. Next time we'll be here again in 2 weeks with Debbie Haynes, who's a leader in Microsoft. And with her, we'll explore more about what it means to lead complex organizations from this rooted place that Vida and I have been talking about today. If you would like to learn more about Rooted and Unwavering, you can also subscribe to our podcast anywhere where you get our podcasts or any podcasts on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else. And of course, you can always reach us via LinkedIn. And Vida will also include a link to The Lion Tells His Tale and your information, that's okay with you, in the sharing of this podcast so people can find out more. So thank you so much. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering, where we help people connect more deeply to their innate potential. See you next time. I'm your host, Hylke Faber.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.